businesses, as well as even tried and true Fortune 500 organizations that have been around for centuries, if not decades, that are now realizing just by listening to their own, not
startups of just 2 or 3 people that achieve great things. And yet you grow that same business to thousands of people. And now people are cost centers because now I'm only.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series brought to you by AKFI, Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bring together to bridge the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. My name is Isabella. I'm the co-host here with another co-host, Manuel, currently on mute because of coughing, and our awesome guests today, Chris and Jeff. Welcome, Chris and Jeff.
Hello.
Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you for taking the time. So thanks to this interview talk series, we get to bring together brilliant thinkers like you guys to together discuss the current state and the future state of ESG, digital transformation, sustainability. And before we start, a very quick intro about you guys to our audience. Start with Chris here. Chris is the vice president at Software and Culture plus co-creator. Did I say it right? I just read it loud, right? Plus co-creator and facilitator of Seneca. How to say that? Seneca Leaders, co-host of Love as a Business Strategy podcast, and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of Love as a Business Strategy. Wow, congrats. That's a big accomplishment.
Thank you.
And turning to Jeff. Jeff is the director of product development at Culture Plus at Software, and co-creator of the Seneca suite of products and services, and is also the host of the Love as a Business Strategy podcast and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of Love as a Business Strategy. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. And to start our conversation, we always give you guys the option to navigate the conversation based on your understanding or your thoughts of the current state or the current trend of sustainability, ESG, and digital transformation. And so please share with us your thoughts on this in terms of the governance and the business strategy. Who wants to go first?
Chris does.
So I am super leaned in and passionate about this topic. I'm not going to say that I'm an expert because I feel like it's so new that, I think everybody's sort of learning and sort of bolting on all these pieces that make up a strong ESG or sustainability strategy. But as we were writing the book and as we've been working with customers and talking to so many different facets of business, what we come to understand is that sustainability is more than just the environmental impact. It's also even more than just the people that we are currently employing. It's sort of thinking things generationally, right? I've heard of this 7th generation concept where as we're making decisions, we're also thinking about 7 generations from now, what are the impacts going to be about what we're deciding on, what we're putting in place, what processes we're building, what technology we're bringing in. And I think that mindset can permeate so many different facets. It doesn't have to stay in certain spaces. And I think leaders especially can benefit when they have that type of mindset, that care and concern, where we're thinking not just about the people that we see every day or the communities we touch every day, but like 7 generations from now, are the things that we're doing still going to make an impact positively for those 7th generations? And I think having that approach is rooted in some of the things that we talk about, but also it can enhance the conversations that we're currently having across the business.
Thank you. Well, Jeff, I'll let you finish, add in whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for many people, I know your audience is likely very tuned into some of the tenets around ESG, sustainability, digital transformation, all those things. But I think sometimes we zoom in a lot on these things from policies and process and all sorts of governance. And I think that, the key to unlocking kind of the true benefits and the outcomes we're looking for in all these efforts is actually getting, kind of speaking to the mission that we have as Love as a Business Strategy and Culture Plus and all that Chris and I do, which is bringing humanity back to the workplace. And I think it's rooted in something that's really meant to be a very human thing, a very organic and real thing. And I think that bridge is important. I think people need more and more opportunities to see how these things aren't just like good on paper, but actually good for people and good between any two individuals, and how that affects anyone from a CEO, a stakeholder, all the way to an end user, a person of the community. And that's where we really work to bridge that gap. When we say love as a business strategy, we're talking about those things. We're talking about the actual mindsets and behaviors of people who make these decisions, who actually do these things, and for what reason and for what drive. And, there's a lot of greed involved in business and in the corporate world. And these things that we're trying to change and do are all wonderful and fantastic. And I think that the key to make them work, though, is to actually start from a place of people's actual mindsets and kind of self-awareness around why they do what they do and why it matters. Because as long as greed is still like the number one part of our mindset, things will only change on paper and not where it really matters.
And Jeff and Chris, if I may ask or add, we all hear about the Great Resignation. We hear not only about remote working, but also we hear about people wanting to work for companies with purpose. So how this connects your work with sustainability, especially the aspect of stakeholders, which are employees, including employees, shareholders, which are, as you said, looking at the value of their investment. So do you see a link between this and the current state with the Great Resignation and the way people approach work, not only decide to come back to work, but maybe they decide to do something completely different and more sustainable and more environmentally friendly?
Yes. No, there's a direct linkage between the Great Resignation, digital transformation, and even sustainability. What I will share is that, whenever you hear the word digital transformation, I hope everyone sort of translates that into human behavior change, because that's really what you're ultimately hoping for, is that the technologies, the processes that you create or recreate or replenish or refresh, whatever language you want to use around that humans are eventually going to adopt, and perform sustainably against that technology. And so many digital transformations, when they don't walk in with that mindset or understanding, it's actually negated or left out of the picture completely. And we start talking about the technology and the coolness and what's going to be possible and the possibilities and moving at the speed of trust and all these great things that make people feel good, but ultimately don't tell me, now, how are we actually going to get people move people along this journey? What are they going to have to give up, right? Like, because in certain ways, there's grief that comes with change, right? Because the way that I used to operate, the things that I used to use, the people that I used to connect with or work with, may be no more, right? I might have to let certain things go. And when we don't have a plan or a conversation about that very real change, sometimes people don't know what to do with that emotion. And people don't know how to necessarily go along that journey with you because you've given them no space or no option. And so they feel like they either change or have to leave, right? And so when you see this Great Resignation happening, it's not just about, oh, my manager asked me to do something different. It's that my manager is expecting me to do things that we have never talked about, that they're not even including me on as they're making calls, right? And there's somebody out there that is looking for my idea, looking for me to speak up, looking for me to contribute in ways that I would love to hear, but that space is not being made available for me. And so what we've seen is that great resignation that's happened is usually a result of the behaviors that people are leaving, not just the managers are trying to get away from, right? And so when you have that perspective and when you take that into account, as you're going through whatever change is sort of necessary in the organization, whether you are looking for more sustainable practices, whether you are looking to reduce your environmental impact, just know that whenever you hear the word change, you should be thinking there's human component here that we can't ignore, that we can't sort of mute, that we can't hope just gets it, because that typically will lead to a turnover or an attrition that probably will disrupt, if not sort of upend the business.
And you talked before about 7 generations, but Isabella just finished a book which is becoming a bestseller, and he titled it "The Digital Mind of Tomorrow." Mm-hmm. So she's looking at how this interaction between digital transformation and people, which you so well characterized, Chris. And I don't know if Isabella wants to add anything.
Manuel and I had a 1,000 conversation about this already, and of course I was just at a conference sharing about that. We're talking about the future of corporations, and I wasn't expecting that much. I thought it's just maybe another boring corporate panel, and actually the organizer did a fantastic job finding the panelists, and they're all from this entrepreneurial background. Some are currently working in the corporate, some never. He's like, I would never work for a corporate. And they just throw out this really authentic, genuine, hard truth about how to do this transformation today, talking about innovation all days. At the end, it's the mind. It's the mindset shift. It's a people change. It's never about technology. And while the corporates encouraging, wanted to advocate for innovation, but they never work on the people, the environment to really support them, to be creative, to be innovative. So there's all these sorts of challenges that they throw out there, which was very exciting to me because it's real. It's not just something like, oh, we get the numbers, we get the team set up, we get all those blah, blah, blah. So that was really encouraging to me, and also, aligning with what Manuel said about my belief, what my book represents about how to face this transitioning. It's not just about, Chris said, technology. It's done a core. It's about human beings. Like, right? If we don't get people doing it, you can have thousands of amazing technology sitting there, and we don't know how to deal with it. Sorry, it's not my interview. I'll pass it back to John.
No.
You're passionate. We'll not edit this portion.
No, we're not cutting anything.
No, we don't cut again.
I think there's an important word you used there around authenticity, right? Authentic. And you talk about the Great Resignation. It's easy to point to all these factors in the economy and in the social justice lane and all these things. But when you talk to people who are actually leaving, it's more of a feeling. It's more, they're not going to sit there and go, it's because we don't meet ESG standards. It's because we don't that's not what they're saying. They're leaving because they don't feel comfortable being themselves. They don't feel like they're represented. It's all feel. And that's the tricky thing that's hard to connect, is that what they need is authenticity. And too often when we make sustainability standards, digital transformation goals, ESG, the goal, the whole purpose, and when that's the target in the crosshairs, we leave the people behind because we're trying to hit metrics, we're trying to hit numbers, and people don't feel that. People don't think that's authentic. If you have a group of people who is frustrated with their business's approach to DEI, for example, and they don't feel represented, they feel there's an underwhelming amount of effort coming from the company. Well, the typical kind of corporate response might be, okay, well, let's stand up a DEI department. Let's assign a Black woman to lead it up, and let's create all this signage and create all these efforts. And I'm not saying those are bad. I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things, but we need to be asking, is it felt? Is it authentic? Because unfortunately, when you stand up those groups and then you leave those groups to do their thing and you go on with business as usual, you're adding to the problem. You're adding unauthentic messaging to the people who just see window dressing and not actual change. And I think that's the danger that everyone needs to be aware of as they approach change, is that authenticity does not come by way of how many dollars you spend. It comes by way of actual behavior, actual meaningful behavior, not just words, but action.
Yeah. And I'll just add that in many ESG strategies, even to this day, you see this bifurcation where everything is separate, right? Where if I want to feel included, I have to join a meeting after hours with that ERG. If I want to feel like I'm giving value back to the community, I have to go on Saturday or on the weekends and do that time, and everything is disconnected. But when I show up in my everyday meetings, when I have conversations with my leader, my supervisor, my manager, all of that disappears. And I am just now a body to produce work or to get tasks done. And I think if you have to really rethink ESG, it should be permeating inside of the everyday and not just on the periphery. And I feel like many organizations and leaders still see ESG as an add-on, as in addition to, as an extra, and not as core, not as foundational, not as required in order to get to the either short-term or long-term results that the Wall Street analysts are looking for the company to achieve. And I think switching that mindset and then looking at what everyday behaviors should our team exhibit, and what should I be doing as a leader or as a teammate to really ensure that from an ESG perspective, we are thinking inclusively, right? We aren't letting the sense of urgency be the excuse as to why we make decisions, quickly without considering the impacts to 7 generations from now, or the people to my left or to my right, right? And I think that sometimes that is a difficult thing to move because that is people change, right? That's not a strategy document we can inherit from a consulting firm that we've hired, who are not even inside of the walls of this business, to create strategy that we now just go and try and execute, right? And as a consultant, I'm speaking now, so this could be, maybe cutting business from my hands, but if a consultant comes out of your organization to tell you what to do, and you don't even talk to the people inside of your organization, what do we expect to happen inside of that strategy, right? And so many digital transformations start that way. So many ESG strategies start that way. It starts outside of the organization when it's like, but you've hired some really smart people. Have you ever asked them what they think they should be creating for 7 generations? Have we thought to ask them what they would like to see in their everyday environment? And maybe that's where our strategy should emanate from. Now, I get it. Like, I would love to support an organization in that manner, but a true consultant is going to actually take you back to that question and say, like, well, what do your people think? A good one will, right? But that's where a lot of organizations, we hire these really smart people and treat them like they're dumb. Treat them like they have no ideas, like they have nothing to input, like they can't think of ways that the business can create value in other ways. And so hiring really smart people and keeping them quiet or not asking them for their opinion, to me, is an insult. And so I think that a lot of the things that we're talking about here can actually come from within. You don't need to hire somebody to get the ideas and opinions from your team, but you do have to treat them well. You do have to think about how you can build trust inside of the organization. You do have to have relationships, right? And that sometimes it's a tall order for leaders who have never been trained to do that.
So, Chris, you pointed to something that let's start with sustainability, which is mostly used as a triple bottom line. Of course, the financial part, the profit and loss, is the well-known bottom line. And then we have people, and we have also the planet, the environment. And I think executives especially have a problem to cope, because for the last 50 years, since Friedman, the economist, the Nobel Prize economist, said that the only focus of management, of senior management, is for shareholders. And now they have to focus on the stakeholders. It's like they look at a different world. And I don't know if you want to add anything, or Jeff, from your practitioner viewpoint, not only the theoretical viewpoint. So how do they expect to add value? Well, they see that the people and the work for the environment are actually costs. There are cost centers.
Yes.
If you look at the balance sheet, they said human capital, X billions or X millions, depending on the size of the capital, and assets, hard asset, the other part.
Yeah,
So
this is
how do
where
you see this changing? Can it be changed in our generations? I'm not ready to wait another 7 generations for the change.
I'm with you there. But this
7
is where like the concepts of conscious capitalism come into play, because right now capitalism is all about exploiting other humans to get benefit for some smaller group of people, right? And if we want that very sort of the core of that question that you just posed to be, sort of changed or updated or refreshed, we now have to start redefining what capitalism is and how we teach that inside of the business schools and inside of the VC firms and inside of the places where capital is given and or distributed. And it doesn't have to necessarily wait until all of those things change. But if you are a sitting leader, if you are an executive, right, I think redefining what does a shareholder mean, and if honestly, like to me, like this is where honesty is typically left out of some of these conversations. If your honest answer is we have to meet Wall Street expectations, which are shareholders, then say that, but that should be known by everybody. So an employee should not be getting a message that you matter if really that's not where leaders are going to be making decisions. You should be saying, hey, we only care about our shareholders. If you're on this mission with us, we would love to keep you going forward and creating value for others, and we'll pay you handsomely for it, or we'll make sure that you have great benefits because of that, or we'll make sure that, right, like there will be something in exchange for that. But I can't lie and say that you are an important shareholder if you're really not, because the decisions that we make are really only for one group of people. And most leaders don't want to do that or say that because like, oh my gosh, that's a bad PR move. It's like, well, you already make decisions that way and you already treat people that way. Why not go ahead and just put that out there? So that way we can manage against those expectations as an employee group, and I can decide and make an informed decision as to whether I want to be a part of that organization where the mission really is to bring value to a small group of people that I will never be a part of. And if that's something that you don't feel comfortable doing, then maybe you should be rethinking how you are prioritizing shareholders against employees, against, the community, et cetera. Because to me, we see people as a conduit to profit and a conduit to value. Like to me, if there's a business out there that thinks that they can accomplish goals or meet value or meet the expectations that even a small group of investors have without people, then to me, they are in a state of delusion, right? So every employee that you brought on is meant to bring about value that should be exponential in return. But oftentimes we create structure and processes, thanks to capitalism, that limit people's ability to bring about that return, because we tell people, well, no, you have to respect the power that bees before you can actually share an idea. Oh, that feedback that you have for me sort of limits or threatens my power or the ability for me as a leader to show up as someone who's capable of leading this organization forthrightly into the future. So therefore, you need to save that idea until you can get into a seat where I sit, and then you can actually think about that change. But again, that cycle has already started. So once I get into that seat, I'm now resistant to change too, because I've only seen that be true for the leaders who got into the seats or to the power or to the levels of the organization that I've sort of wanted. And so getting to the point of that question, if we're not willing to actually redefine the importance of all of the stakeholders inside of the stakeholder group and actually agree upon that as all of the senior leaders of an organization, then to me, we're only doing lip service to half or most of that list.
And Jeff, I guess I don't know if I want to say this or not, but I think you're reporting to Chris, do you?
No, I think Chris covered it. I would add simply, just like, not even add, is just really highlighting just the element of how often we are working with people that we're getting the absolute bare minimum out of. When you talk about quiet quitting being the norm, this stems from that exact issue. And it's not so much that, people can't do the job, that they're not smart, that it's unfixable. But I think many businesses and business leaders refuse to accept their role in that conversation. And that's exactly what Chris is saying, which is like that honesty and that transparency is not there. And humans are smart. We've
authenticity.
Authenticity, absolutely. We're humans are very attuned to this. We're very smart. We're naturally attuned to what's going on around us. So we felt it. We felt it for decades now, and it's only through this, kind of era that we're in that we're finally doing something about it. And I think there's a lot of reaction. We're talking about a lot of reaction in the work that we do, and it's important to zoom out and look at it for what it is, which is that every human has this huge amount of potential. That's why you can have startups of just 2 or 3 people that achieve great, great things. And yet you grow that same business to thousands of people. And now people are cost centers, because now you're a warm body with a price tag, and you get that bare minimum. Imagine if you had a company or a group of 1,000 people that were operating at that startup level of enthusiasm, energy, creativity, innovation. Imagine the problems they could solve. And we would be having a very different conversation right now around ESG, around sustainability. Digital transformation would come naturally. Digital transformation would be solved. And it's just not there, because nobody wants to step outside their lanes right now for fear of retribution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would even argue that digital transformation would be a thing. We would just be renovating. Like, it would just be a series of renovations, right? Like, I love sort of HGTV and DIY house and stuff, even though I do none of it. I absolutely do none of it. But to me, like, when you approach something as a renovation, well, we're going to take this kitchen and we're just going to update the kitchen, right? Like, we're not touching the whole house. We're not getting a whole new house. But I think transformation requires, that constant sort of, resetting of the foundation, constant building up, and right. And so I think if we had the environment that Jeff just mentioned, we would just be renovating. We wouldn't have to train.
Chris, you're absolutely right. And before turning to Isabella, I actually wanted to add that practically, when you do digital transformation, in my case, in the telecom industry, the most resistance is from people, because nobody tells them what's going to happen to them with their jobs, with their career, with their passions, with their dedication. Is it just going to be replaced by one or another AI system?
Yeah.
But I'll turn to Isabella to help with more questions.
Are we running out of questions? I think we have.
No, I'm afraid we are running out of time.
I know that. That's why I shut my mouth. Yeah, I think we still have a few questions need to catch up. Feel free, Mawa, if you want to address those, because I can easily, speak a lot when it comes to the conversation like today about human side, about the social, about how people feels the real things instead of the blah blah blah. So I really enjoy both of your sharing. Give us an open book of what's actually going on instead of what seems going on. Well, we kind of touched on everything, because I was gonna ask. We were so close to to address. There's all these problems. I was gonna ask you both, like, what caused this, what leads us to this stage, right? But then you kind of touch on that also, because of the system, and it's just a hard. Yeah, it's definitely a huge challenge, especially for big corporates. I was talking to, I can't even name him because he's like, oh, don't tell anyone. I said this consulting company, and what the company says is completely different than what they're actually doing. That's the reality. Yeah, and they're a famous consulting company, and their action just can't keep up, or they didn't even intend to keep up with what they're trying to do on the PR side. So I wanted to maybe give audience some hope. Like, what's the upside, if you guys can encourage. I personally definitely believe, like Jeff says, it's happening now, like more than ever. Like this awareness about transformation, about bringing people's talent. It's not just treating people like a machine, a object over there. What's the upside you see now to encourage this thing?
I think with the onset of so many, we call them activist employees, but these are the employees that are willing to speak up, not just leave, but actually speak up to change what's happening inside of companies, to get leaders more aware and leaned in to change. I think
Mm-hmm.
this onset and this trend of these employees that are willing to use their voice and their influence to do the right thing or have their organizations do the right thing is now creating this opportunity for new processes to emerge, new products to emerge, new communities to be met and sort of, spoken to or given products to, right? And so companies are benefiting just by listening to these employees that are willing to say like, hey, y'all know we're excluding this other group over here who might need our products in this way, right? And all we have to do is think about our channel strategy differently, or we have to, make the small little edit or tweak to the product, and it now benefits a whole community that we've ignored up until now because our processes and systems and sort of ways of thinking didn't allow for that community to be engaged. And so we're seeing this added benefit just by having someone brave enough, courageous enough to speak up and say, I think that we can actually benefit someone else that we've never talked about before. And we see that happening over and over again in both new businesses as well as even tried and true Fortune 500 organizations that have been around for centuries, if not decades, that are now realizing just by listening to their
Mm-hmm.
own, not hiring a consulting firm, not going out of their walls, but just listening internally, they've increased their revenues. They've added service lines. They've added product lines. We did the same thing inside of software, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of just that one sort of example of, hey, before we went into the pandemic, we would have never thought about doing virtual training. We'd have never thought about creating digital products that aid people in their transformation journey or that give them a way to stay on top of or committed to their behavior change. But we were able to listen and like, man, actually, a lot of these other gyms are doing these sort of virtual trainings for working out. Why can't we do that for culture change? Why can't we create little exercises for people to keep up to, right? And so those small little things, if a leader is willing to listen, right? That's the key. If you're willing to listen, you actually might have some ideas that could change the organization. And I will always tell every leader, there is no one else outside of the walls of your organization thinking about how to make your place better. No one. Not even the consultants you have on payroll, not even, sometimes not even the board members, right? But only your employees are going to bed thinking about how to make the walls of your organization safer, more productive, more sustainable, more profitable, all of those things. And so if you're looking outside of your walls, you might be missing an opportunity.
I think the flip side of that, the paradox of this change comes in the fact that it comes with the acceptance of how hard it is and how much time it's going to take. I think it's a mindset shift globally we're looking to have across the human race. And if we think that's going to be something that happens overnight, Chris has a saying, it's always that overnight successes lead to daylight failures. And that's what happens when you focus on this light switch that you think you can flip. And I think the fastest we can move forward is the sooner we can understand that it's slow. And that's a hard thing for people to bear when they want change now and fast. But the reality of what we're trying to do requires people's minds and hearts really to make a significant shift. And I personally believe that the change is coming. The revolution is already in motion, but how it plays out is still up to us. And I think the more we push to say, it's got to be this way, and we try to force that into position, the more that unauthentic side comes out, and the more that people are not keeping up with what's actually changing. So what we're talking about is real trust, real relationships, it's a human to human thing. Even though we're talking about organizations and large scale change, the real change comes at the human level, the contributor level, the people who wake up and come to work, the humans that actually get this work done. And I always point to agile transformation as an example of where, a lot of people can relate to this because this has been going on for so long, ever since agile has been around. And so many businesses wanted that change to happen overnight. And they brought in the ceremonies, they brought in the process, and they just said, everybody's doing this now because the consultants say it works, the books say it works. and you have all these people just going to stand-ups, going to sprints, going to sprint reviews, all these processes, not knowing why they're doing it, not knowing how it's supposed to work, not realizing that the Agile Manifesto is first written with mindsets in place before doing any process. And so everyone's out here doing Agile and nobody's out there being Agile. And if you look at all these other changes, it's the same exact thing when it comes to, we want to be sustainable. We want to be, digitally transformed. We cannot just go through the motions of becoming that. We have to actually bring people along, believe in what we're doing, show that. And that takes time. That takes effort, time. It is not easy. And there's no easy switch. And the sooner we all realize that, the faster we'll actually move collectively, because we'll be honest about it. We'll say this is hard and we're trying, but we're going to try. We're going to suck at it, but we're going to bring you along with us. We're going to try. You're going to not like it for a little bit, but we're being transparent about it and we're going to get through it together. These types of things mean more to people than just saying, we got it all figured out. We got it. Here it is. Come on board. We got it all figured out. There's the finish line. Because that's never true. It's never honest. It's never authentic.
Jeff, listening to you and to Chris, I sort of think that leadership is confused with I know the future. Just ask me and I'll tell you what the future is. And, we can leave it for another interview, and I'd love to have you back on a continued discussion, because that's the paradigm shift we're talking about, the mindset shift that we need to do. And it takes time. And then the quarterly results go check every quarter, right? And they have to report to Wall Street. And we should maybe ask ourselves how a new leader will look, because he or she has to look long-term and short-term at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's hard on ourselves if we try to do that.
And we talk a lot about vulnerability, and what you just said there, Manuel, is key. Is that there's this ecosystem we've built where it's not just people looking up to leaders for answers, but it's leaders stepping into roles, feeling like they have to have the answer. And when people think vulnerability, they're like, oh, all this mushy gushy stuff and all these feelings. And no, like, we're talking about a leader who can stand up in front of people and say, I don't know what to do. I need help. And the amount of power that is behind that, especially going through change, is insurmountable. You cannot believe the amount of energy and rallying you'll have behind a leader who is authentic behind that type of vulnerability. And it's just so, we say that a lot, and then you have leaders who kind of hear us, but then go and again, try to do performative things and try to be vulnerable. I'm talking about authentic vulnerability, where you come to the table really with your struggles, with your strengths and your weaknesses, all those things. And time again, we see that is what it takes. That is actually the type of leadership that actually makes a difference.
In short, we should be humans while we are leaders.
This whole show could have been just like 5 seconds long. It's just like, hey, everybody just be human. And we're good.
No, we need to tell them, what does that mean now today? Okay, Jeff and Chris. So definitely love to continue hear your show. Well, is it something like this you're talking about on the podcast? Or it could be more detailed, or... You
mean for our show, for Love as a Business? Yeah, Love as a Business Strategy podcast. This is all Chris and I will talk your heads off on Love as a Business Strategy podcast about basically this. We spend all of our time talking to and just learning from people. Like, we don't need you to have a PhD in anything. We don't ask our guests to have, done it all, because we've all lived a human part of this transformation of the world. And we're all working more hours in our lives than we are doing anything else. And so to ignore this as if this is just a 9-to-5 thing and then we come home and live our real life is why we made the podcast, to say, hey, this is all one life. We're all doing this. We're all struggling together. We're all learning together. And, I think we leave that at the door too often, trying to address all this business stuff, and we miss the connection and the importance behind it. That's the
Jeff,
podcast. Yeah.
Jeff promoted me to number 99 guest in his show. I almost made it to top 100.
You're 100 in my book, Manuel.
Thank you. So, Isabella, I'll turn it to you because
I'm actually sharing something tomorrow at a virtual conference about how to win in the digital economy. Something I was gonna say, I'm gonna integrate something that you guys shared today to my presentation. I'm the type that I will modify things until the last minute. So this is great. They need to hear this, not to how to win in digital economy. It's how to live in the digital world as a human. Yeah.
Yes. And
So
I think
definitely.
I think just as Jeff was saying, just that intellectual humility. If more people had that, that willingness to be wrong, to seek out answers, be curious, engage curiosity among teams, you might be able to discover some new things that you've never seen before, hear things you never heard before, see things you never seen before. And I think that is, to me, what's the big opportunity ahead of us, is that like just by listening to each other, we can unlock so much stuff that we would have never had on a roadmap, that will never be in a quarterly plan, that would have never been approved by the board, like all of those things. And so just that intellectual humility.
Absolutely. Well, you both shared a lot tips already, but just to end this conversation, on a highlight, if you have to, give us your top takeaway for today, both of you, what would those be? Jeff, please.
Yeah, I would say, to the average listener, I don't know if you're a CEO or whatever, but I'm going to assume that the average person, you work, you may be a leader, but if you're here and you're listening, you care. And I think the one kind of encouragement I could have is around what we kind of ended with, which is around courage. I think honesty is hard. We've talked about all the barriers today to that honesty, why it's hard to speak up, why, the structure and you feel like you need to have a leadership position. And all these factors go into the fear behind working today. And unfortunately, it's very easy to also fall into the trap of saying, well, that change has to start somewhere else. I need to see that train rolling before I jump on. I need to know that my leaders and their leaders and the leaders on the very top are 100% bought in before I can, sing from the mountaintops these praises. And unfortunately, that's not how it's going to work. I think the revolution starts at every level. And I think people are looking for hope, and not to throw it back on them. There are people who need that hope, but hope starts with us. I think hope starts with each and every person who's willing to voice themselves in the workplace, willing to bring more of themselves into the workplace, and to speak up where maybe others may not. And I think that goes with every facet. I'm not just talking about inclusion. I'm not just talking about any one piece. I'm just talking about from good ideas to bad ideas to social justice, to all these things. It takes courage to be honest. And I think if honesty is the new currency of what we're trying to get to, and I think the more honesty we have, as opposed to trying to keep things harmonious, as opposed to trying to keep the peace and not stir the pot, finding that for yourself. So this is directly to you, the listener. What does that look like for you to be honest? Where do you find a need for a little bit more courage? You don't have to go out and just kick down your boss's door and say, here's what I think about you. I'm not encouraging that, but I think we'll be surprised if we introspect on ourselves, on where we're being a little more harmonious and a little less honest. And I think we'll find opportunities for growth for ourselves.
I'll just add, yeah, great, Jeff. And I would just add that when we talk about this sort of nexus of digital transformation, ESG, and sort of the people aspects of everything, I think the challenge that many organizations and leaders have is like, we jump to how do we scale this before we actually answer the real question, which is how do I change, right? And I think change starts with you. And so the biggest takeaway would be in listening to this, don't think about everybody else. Think about, how do I sit into this picture? What are my things? What behaviors do I exhibit that lend themselves to being sustainable, to being socially responsible, to being, ready for any type of transformation headed my way? And to me, that's where you have the most power, because you do have the ability to change yourself. You do have the ability to challenge your mindset, to ask yourself what else can be true in moments, to stop and think about what needs am I meeting, because that's really what behaviors are. There are
Mhm.
subconscious ways of meeting needs, right? And so why am I behaving this way? If you have to start asking, what am I needing that's making me behave this way, then that might get you to introspection, or another way of finding a way to, either treat people differently, to include others, to listen, to challenge yourself, to be intellectually humble, and be
Mhm.
someone who's willing to be wrong, right? And I think that to me is the big takeaway here, is like, start with you. Like, don't I feel like certain times when leaders be like, so how do we scale this? It's like, you're trying to delay this. And I get it. Like, it's wise. It's a great question. But really, why didn't we start with, how can I participate in this? Or what would I need to do to take the first step? Right. That to me is a smarter question, or I should say a better question. There's no such thing as a dumb question, but I always think that's a stall tactic whenever I get that question. It's like, in all of this, I what you're thinking about is, how does everybody else change and I don't have to? So.
Inside out power.
Mhm.
Both of you are actually sharing something very critical for entrepreneur, or I think for a human being moving forwards, to be able to reflect within and to find the power within instead of seeking outside. I have a live talk, Manuel knows every Friday, and he knows how many times I actually talk about the same thing, to find your unique value based on your intuitive, right, calling. That's just most powerful tool that we all possess, but we're afraid to use it, actually, or we forgot to use it. Thank
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And
Thank you.
we want you. We want you back. We just
Yes,
call it part one of many.
Okay,
Sure.
awesome. Well, that's a
exactly.
come back.
Absolutely.
All right, so let me just wrap this up properly for our audience here. Well, again, Jeff and Chris, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all these valuable things, which worth sharing 100 times over and over, to bring awareness. And thank you to our audience for tuning in, and make sure you join us every week for a new episode of Actionable ESG Talk series hosted by AKFI, where you will gain new perspectives on how to mitigate risks and create value by integrating ESG and digital transformation. So until the next week, goodbye for now. Thank you.
Bye bye, Chris. Bye, Jeff. Thank
Bye.
you for today's great talk. Thanks.
Absolutely.